So the fire scene is a very famous warrior cat scene. It's from the book Long Shadows in the arc Power of Three. And unsurprisingly, it's one of my absolute favorite scenes from Warrior Cats. And you saw the title and thumbnail, so you already know what I'm making. I'm making a Warrior Cats Booknook inspired by the fire scene. For the fallen tree, I glued together a bunch of sticks I found outside, and then I used this foam clay that I got on Amazon. It worked great. This stuff is great to use. I was originally going to use metal magic for this, but this stuff worked out a whole lot better. After the tree was all covered and I was happy with it, I took an X-Acto knife and I added some texture. It looks super weird right now, but I promise that once I start painting it, it's gonna look a whole lot better. The funny part is this took me like 30 minutes to do. I don't know, it just seems so basic. I don't know why it took me so long. And now it's time to assemble the box. If you don't know what a booknook is, it's basically a little scene that you put between two books on your bookshelf. I chose to use this thin cardboard because it's light and it's very easy to work with. I started out by painting the insides of this with this fire design, and then I taped it all together. Right now I'm figuring out how to make the two sides of the cliff. In the scene, the three, Jay, Lion, and Holly, are trapped in a fire in the ThunderClan camp, and Squirrelflight comes to save them. There's a gap between them, so Squirrelflight knocks over a tree. Or maybe a dead tree, I'm not 100% sure. Warrior Cats has never been 100% realistic, so of course Squirrelflight can knock over a tree. When she tries to cross, Ashfur gets in the way and they have their confrontation. I'm planning on making the scene and then putting the cats in after. I don't think I'll put Squirrelflight in though. I do love Squirrelflight and I love drawing her, but I really don't want to draw any of the cats backwards. I want to have the three in the background looking scared and shocked, you know. And then I want to have Ashfur front and center. This way you can kind of infer that Squirrelflight is just in front of the scene. Although, while looking at references, I've seen a couple different things. One is Ashfur in front of the tree and then Squirrelflight in front of him. Another is Squirrelflight with the three and then Ashfur on the other side of the log facing them. And then the third is Squirrelflight in front of the log and then Ashfur in front of her. So I'm not 100% yet if I'm gonna draw Squirrelflight or Ashfur. Anyway, back to the build itself. I work in this weird way where I just jump around to whatever seems most interesting at the time. This actually works really well in regards to painting though, because I just move on to something else and then when that paint's dry, I move back to that thing. The purpose of these little cardboard things I made is basically to put clay on top. It's like a skeleton or an armature, except obviously not as intricate or complicated. The purpose of this is to use less clay. The cardboard is way less expensive than the clay, so I use cardboard where I can so I can use less clay. The bowl of water is there so I can wet my fingers and smooth it out a lot easier. I'm planning to make some more of these, so if you have a favorite Warrior Cat scene or even Wings of Fire scene, let me know in the comments. I mean, you could also do any book series. I'm always looking for some more reading suggestions. Some scenes I am definitely thinking about making into these are, definitely number one is Flametail's death. That is one of my absolute favorite scenes in all of Warrior Cats. Just how stressed out he is the entire book. And then him struggling and then eventually giving into it and just how calm it feels. And then Jayfeather diving in and then Rock telling him that Flametail's meant to die here? It's one of those scenes that paints a very vivid image in my head. Another scene I'd really like to do is the Dark Forest, and also when Firestar becomes leader. I really like Firestar. I also really like Jayfeather. Thanks to time-lapse magic, we are almost done with this step. Once I'm done with this, I'm gonna let it dry, and then I'm gonna come back, and I'm probably gonna add another layer on top. When that's dry, then we can get into painting. The log is dry, so now we're adding more paint on top. I'm adding the light color on top, and then adding more detail. The way I like to paint trees is starting with a base coat and then adding some bronze and then some darker colors on top. Surprisingly, the bronze actually does end up looking pretty natural, even though it's like sparkly. And this is the next day. I glued this piece in, and am adding another layer of clay on top. This is really going to help me smooth out some of those rough edges. Here are both pieces put in with the clay on top. And I promise you, once I start painting it and adding fake moss on top, this is gonna look a whole lot better. The way Ashfur looked, he didn't really fit into the scene. So I put this red and orange paint on top to hopefully make it look like lighting effects. Hot glue is my absolute best friend during this project, so here I am gluing him into the scene. And after painting it, adding the fake moss, and adding Ashfur in, it's really starting to come together. The side view is absolutely hilarious. It's honestly funny to me how 3D I can make him look considering he's just a paper cutout. And now let's focus on the rest of the cats in this scene. Here first is Lion Blaze. He was probably the easiest to put into the scene because I just hot glued him to the log. Look at all those hot glue strings. And as you can see, connecting his paws, there is a toothpick. This is a technique I use to get all the cats into the right position. How I make Ashfur look like he's stepping out and walking towards Squirrelflight is just a toothpick connected to his paw. And here are Hollyleaf and Jayfeather. I don't show it in this video, but those are not the designs I ended up going with for those two. Honestly, the way I drew them just really bothered me. So instead of just leaving it as is, I just redesigned them, which I think is a good thing. The reason I had to stab a hole in the clay with that X-Acto knife was because the toothpicks were not strong enough to do that. The way I got Hollyleaf and Jayfeather into the scene was putting toothpicks to the back of them and then stabbing them into the ground. And this is me realizing, oh shoot, I have to add lighting effects to the 3 as well. I don't think you guys grasped how long all of this project took me. I did all of this over the course of 1 week. And obviously it wasn't working hours on end on each day of the week, but it took me a really long time. That's why people complaining about my pricing for these things seems silly to me. Here's Lion Blaze complete, and there's Hollyleaf complete. Let me take a moment to go a little in depth on the materials I used. For the structure itself, I used this thin cardboard I used to pack sticker orders. It's thin, light, and doesn't bend super easily. For the paint, I used a mixture of CaliArt acrylic paint and DecoArt acrylic paint. If I had to recommend one over the other, I'd recommend the CaliArt acrylic paint. The colors are just really vibrant and nice. The paint isn't super thin, so you don't need as many layers, and it just feels and looks really high quality. For the log and the 2 pieces of land, I used foam clay, specifically the brand Pixis. Honestly, I couldn't recommend it more. It's smooth, super nice to work with, and it dries relatively fast. For the grass, I just used some dried moss that I got from the dollar store. And like I've mentioned before, I glued it all together with some hot glue. The reason I have the site out is to measure the sides. They were too big, so I had to trim them down a little bit. This is so it looks more seamless when I add it to my shelf. So throughout this project, I keep going over to my shelf and seeing how it looks in there. Unfortunately, the cardboard kept bending inward, so I needed to add some support on the sides. Here I am adding some fairy lights in. This is so it looks like the fire is actually glowing. I really like adding lights to these. I think it just really brings the whole thing together. The way I get the lights in is I put holes on the sides, and then I feed the lights through. All the lights are covered up by those flames right there, so you won't be able to see them. And this is what it looks like on the back. I taped everything up so the lights didn't move around. And here we go. This is how I have the lights. I think it looks super awesome. I am super happy with how this turned out. And I gotta give Ashfur his Moon Kitty blonde hair. And there you go, blonde Ashfur. I should mention if you want to buy this scene or the Into the Wild one, they're both available on my website. Or if there's a specific scene you want, you can always commission me. You can message me on Instagram, TikTok, or send me an email. I really hope you guys like how it turned out.